Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our metrics webinar. We've got quite a few slides to go through today. If you have questions as we go, if you could please chat those in, and then we'll address those at the end of the presentation. As I said, this webinar this morning is on the subject of metrics. It's part of the Asset Management Program implementation. And I'll kind of give everyone an update on what you need to be tracking and all that kind of thing. So here's a general overview. We'll talk about why metrics are part of the Asset Management Program, what the metrics are, how to track them, and some implementation type issues toward the end. So to get started, why are metrics part of the Asset Management Program? Well, it's a way to collect data on the implementation process of asset management, making sure that water systems are actually implementing the asset management program and not just sitting back and watching things kind of roll along. The indicators, the metrics we consider to be indicators of implementation. It will show us trends over time. We'll be able to kind of take a look at things. It's going to take a few years of gathering this information before we can really get some meaningful results out of it, but we've got to start somewhere. And it's a good indication of some water system health, how the water systems are operating, and are they getting better, are they getting worse, or are they pretty much staying status quo? So let's go through there's a variety of community metrics. These are required by rule, and we'll go into each one of these independently after this page. The first one is operating ratio. The next one is operating cost to produce water per service connection. Breaks per 10 miles of distribution pipe, non-revenue water, or your percentage loss, maintenance tasks per year, planned versus unplanned on vertical assets, and we'll explain that further. And then finally, one additional customer service metric to be tracked and will be determined by the water system. So let's go to the first one, operating ratio. This is basically taking into account all of your costs, your chemical costs, your maintenance costs, your labor costs, your debt service, anything like that, and basically dividing that cost by the revenues that you're getting in for operating your water system, people paying their bills. And that should be less than 1. Or here's another way to think of it. Utilities operating ratio is its operating expenses divided by the operating revenue or your net sales, taking into account any expansion or debt repayment. It is the total O&M cost divided by the total operating revenue. Next metric is the operating cost to produce water per service connection. And again, it's taking into account all of your costs to produce the water divided by the number of service connections, whether that is residential, industrial, or some other non-residential type applications, all of your service connections. This will allow us to kind of compare apples to apples from system to system. Basically, the operation and maintenance costs for water service can be compared between utilities once it's normalized by the water production numbers to give a unit cost on the basis of number of accounts served by miles of distribution pipeline. I will point out that depreciation is not included in the total operation and maintenance cost. The cost per connection is the O&M cost divided by residential connections and the number of non-residential connections. So it includes all of your service connections in your water system. The breaks per 10 miles of pipe. This is the horizontal assets, if you will. We want to take a look at how many breaks you have per 10 miles of distribution line. The industry standard is set up in terms of breaks per 100 miles of pipe, but not a lot of the systems in Ohio have hundreds of miles of pipe. The big systems do, but many have far smaller distribution systems. So we've broken that down a little bit. The breaks per 10 miles of distribution pipe, it quantifies the condition of the water distribution system. Looking at the annual number of breaks per 10 miles of pipe, a break does mean physical damage to a pipe, valve, hydrant, or other appurtenance that results in the abrupt loss of water. And again, it is breaks per 10 miles of distribution pipe. The industry standard is, I believe, 20 per 100 miles of distribution pipe. So per 10 miles, that's 2 breaks per 10 miles of pipe. So it's what you're striving to get to. Non-revenue water. This is a table from the AWWA water balance table, and basically it's looking at the areas that are not really accounted for. You're not receiving payment for the water. There's some unbilled authorized consumption, which would be potentially unbilled metered consumption and unbilled unmetered consumption. That could be things like your city buildings. You may have meters on them, but you don't charge anyone for that. There's apparent losses, which is maybe like things like unauthorized consumption, people stealing water. Customer metering inaccuracies. If your meters are running slow, that's going to be an apparent loss. Or if there's some systematic data handling errors, that might be included in apparent losses. The real losses are things such as leakage on transmission and distribution mains, any leakage or overflows at utility storage tanks, or leakage on service connections up to the point of the customer's meter. So these are all things that you need to take into account. AWWA has a nice water audit tool that's available. It's free, so I would encourage everyone to take a look at that and make use of that if you can. And basically, we want to make sure you're accurately measuring the non-revenue water. To do that, really, you need to make sure that your system's completely metered. Just keep in mind that meters are our system's cash registers. That's the money coming in. If you're not metering accurately, or you're not getting billed, those customers aren't getting billed accurately, and that's money down the drain. The next metric is maintenance tasks per year on vertical assets. What we're looking at in particular is planned versus unplanned, proactive versus reactive type maintenance tasks. And when we talk about vertical assets, we mean those things that are above ground, such as elevated storage tanks, booster stations, and treatment plants. So we really want to take a look at making sure you're recording all of your maintenance activities and quantifying whether they are planned, proactive, or they're unplanned and reactive. Obviously, it's much more efficient to do planned maintenance in advance of things happening, but you can't prevent everything. There will be emergencies and breaks that even on the best maintained assets, things happen. So it's basically the ratio of the planned maintenance tasks versus the number of unplanned maintenance tasks. Customer service metric. This is the one that you guys get to determine what you would like to track for your system. And I've got a whole list of things that are potential suggestions. You may come up with something else. One might be service complaints or call center indicators, maybe like a response time for requests for service. Residential service charges is a potential. The customer cost per account, dollars per account, that might be something you want to look at. Or billing accuracy. How many errors do you see in, say, 10,000 billings, for example? The per capita consumption. How much water are your customers using in gallons per day, per person per day? That could be a good indicator of how much water people are using per day, and maybe you want to encourage conservation. The service affordability is another one. We hear all the time that people say they can't afford to have their water rates raised. Maybe this would be something you'd want to track. Delinquency rate. So every time you're not getting paid for a bill, that's money that's not coming in to reinvest in your water system. Maybe you want to take a look at some low-income billing assistance rates to help some of your less well-off customers, or maybe those folks that are on fixed incomes. Maybe you do some stakeholder outreach and take a look at, do some work with your customers to see what they think about your service you're providing, and maybe come up with some ideas to improve your service. Maybe you have a customer service contact that you want to keep track of. And water service disruptions is another one. There are quite a few of these. If you look at the 2017 AWWA Utility Benchmarking Manual, there's a whole host of these. This is just a sampling of those that you could choose from. Again, this is something that you pick. Make sure it makes sense for your water system. It's tracking something that you're interested in, and tracking a way to provide better service to your customers. Now, what I've talked about so far, those were all for community water systems. There are separate metrics for non-community water systems. First one is documentation of instances where the system pressure was not maintained in accordance with the rules. Again, very similar to community systems, we want to check, keep an eye on repair, rehab, or replacement tasks per year, emergency versus planned. Want to make sure that the non-community systems are thinking about putting together a reserve fund. And then last, the number of days that they are unable to serve water because of a disruption in their water system. So go through these individually. The documentation of instances where the pressure was not maintained in accordance with the rule. Again, the rule states that it's got to be 20 psi at all times. And basically, we want to make sure that they document those circumstances where a system was not operating within the operational requirements. You should be including information on the date, the time, the duration, and the description of the instance. So systems are, another way to just say that systems are required to operate within the operational requirements of the rule. Again, making sure you document all these things. When the event happened, what happened, what caused it, how long it lasted, and what you did to get back into compliance. Okay, the second metric for our non-community systems is the rehab, repair, and replacement tasks, emergency versus planned. So it's very similar to the community system one. Just keeping an eye on the efforts that the utility is making towards doing more planned maintenance activities rather than reactive maintenance activities, and making sure that these are recorded and the causes of them are documented as well. Was it a break? Was it unexpected? What were the circumstances that those occurred under, and basically recording those and tracking those over time. If you start to see a lot of emergency ones coming up, perhaps you need to get more into planned maintenance, proactive maintenance. And that's really where we're trying to go with this, is getting folks more thinking about doing your maintenance tasks in advance, doing the best you can to keep things running, keep the maintenance tasks up to speed, so you don't have as many emergency efforts. Reserve funds. For water systems, for non-community water systems, this is a little bit different because basically running a water system is not what they generally do. It's a side item to whatever business or effort that they are running. It's just they have to have water in order to run that business or function. Basically, we recommend that the non-community water systems have some reserve fund in place to cover their most expensive asset. In the event that they aren't able to immediately start a reserve fund, maybe they can't keep putting money aside right away, they could show that they have a line of credit available to them in case of emergency. So if an emergency does happen, there are funds in place that they can go ahead and get that fixed in a timely manner. Again, just making sure, cover your most expensive asset, or maybe your most critical asset. For non-community systems, a lot of them are smaller. Their most critical asset may be a well, and probably their most expensive as well. So taking the steps to be ready to respond to an emergency if it should occur, including having the funding in place. The number of days that they're unable to serve water, just basically recording those. What were the circumstances? What happened? Why were you not able to provide service to your utilities? So if they are shut down due to emergencies or maybe some other instances where they're unable to provide water to their service area, want to make sure that those are being tracked. This doesn't include scheduled downtime for repair or the time of the season when seasonal water systems aren't open. That does not count. It's just during when you would normally be expecting to serve water to the public. Starting this year with reporting, we're going to be attempting to have all this reporting done on the 2020 license to operate. We'll have some fill in the blanks with the designated units that you can just fill this information in and submit it electronically. Hopefully that will work. This will help us keep this information electronically, and then we'll be able to manage it over time and do some trending with it and do some tracking with it, and not have a separate way that you guys have to submit it. So just kind of kill two birds with one stone. Just a few things about what asset management can do for you. It's my sales pitch part of this presentation. Asset management can help raise capital to improve your infrastructure. It helps you make sure you're doing operation and maintenance on a frequency that makes sense to get the maximum life out of your assets, getting the most bang for your buck. It helps you better respond to emergencies. If you've got a good contingency plan in place and good other operation and maintenance type stuff in place and funding, all those things are in place, then you can respond to the emergencies a lot easier. Also, set aside reserves to replace critical infrastructure in case of an emergency situation. And it allows the system to plan ahead for future improvements and adjust the rates gradually to meet those future financial needs rather than having to raise rates drastically in the event of an emergency. If you've got some plan in place, you're doing your proactive maintenance, you've got a capital improvement plan, you know which projects you need to do, you've taken a look at your critical assets and you've planned ahead, you can plan the funding ahead, and that allows you to adjust the rates much more gradually, and it's a lot easier on your customers. It allows the system to adequately address the health, safety, and welfare of their customers, because after all, that's what we're in this business for, is to provide safe water to our customers. And it establishes the real cost of infrastructure if replacement is needed, and also to make sure that you're adequately insured for catastrophic incidents. And having an asset management program can give you system bonus points when you're coming to us for a WSRLA loan. So that's something good too. And it makes staying in compliance easier because you're planning ahead and doing the things you need to do ahead of time, and compliance issues probably aren't going to sneak up on you as easily. And honestly, in the end run, it will save the system money. Yes, we understand it's going to cost more initially during this time to get everything up and running, and where you getting all your tracking going, and making it become a part of your daily routine. But in the long haul, it will save the system money. So with that, we'll take questions at this point. I'll pause our broadcast, and we'll take a look at the questions and come back and answer those.
All right. The first question we have was, are fire service connections or irrigation service connections included? Are total service connections, active and inactive, included in service connection count?
Okay. The first part of that, fire service connections and irrigation service connections included. I guess my question would be, do you meter those and bill those? If so, they should be included. Second part of that, total service connections, active versus inactive. I would say in most systems that doesn't vary a whole lot. maybe for smaller systems that may be more drastic. I think what we really want to see is taking into account the people that are actually using the water. Yeah, go ahead.
Next question was, AWWA M36 method accounts for all water. Is ILI applicable as a reporting metric?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. The infrastructure leakage index, as defined in M36, I think that would work as well.
Okay. Next one, are the number of breaks per 10 miles reported on a rolling average, 5-year or 10-year?
No, what we're going to do is these metrics will all be reported on an annual basis. When we start looking at trends, we probably will be looking at a longer-term average over time, several years, to get an idea of where things are going. Probably, 5 to 10 years would be reasonable. But each year you'll be reporting on that year's break rate. Next question was, can you provide examples of the questions going to be asked on the license to operate? They will just be the metrics themselves. There won't actually be questions. It will be reporting on the metrics, the 5 standard metrics for community water systems and the 4 standards for non-community systems.
Okay. Then the next one is, what units are maintenance tasks tracked in? Time, dollars, number of tasks?
That is the number of tasks.
Next one would the agency be able to prepare a cheat sheet that presents the formulas you want us to use to determine the metrics?
Yeah, actually we're working on a metrics fact sheet, and we should have that out fairly soon for everyone. It'll be available on our webpage, so it will be documented there.
Then the next one, will there be a fill-in-the-blank form to be submitted with the 2020 LTO? Is it available for review now?
It is not currently available yet. We're still working on it, but yes, it will be as part of the 2020 LTO. At least that's the plan at this point. Hopefully things go to plan.
Next question, how often can you have the 2 breaks per 10 miles? What is the time frame on that for measuring?
The 2 breaks for 10 miles, that's just the industry standard, just kind of a starting point to look at if you're meeting the industry standards or you're above or below. It's just a frame of reference, and that's per year.
Since we still have to maintain out-of-service taps, shouldn't they be included in the calculations?
That's a good question. Actually, I'm going to have to think about that one. I'm not sure. I guess it really depends on the situation. I'm not sure there's a one-size-fits-all answer for this. It would depend on the length of an out-of-service. If you're just out of service for a couple months or something like that, sure, you'd want to track those. But if they're out of service long-term, like the industry has left town sort of thing, and no water is being used there, maybe that's not part of that particular year's inventory.
Looks like that's the last question we have right now. We will leave it open for more questions to trickle in, but we are recording this webinar, and it will be posted. We got a couple more questions. First one is, are there contact hours for this webinar?
No, there are not.
The next question is, going back to maintenance tasks, will there be additional guidance about what to include or how to count a number of tasks?
Yeah, that will be included as part of the metrics fact sheet that will be out soon.
Then our last question was, will the slides used today be available for download? And yes, we can post this PowerPoint online as well as the recorded webinar.
Okay, there's another question. Where can we find the metrics online? That's actually in the rule itself. It's OAC 3745 or 30, OAC 3745-87-05. So the metrics are there, and it's also in the guidance that goes along with their. And it's on our asset management webpage. All right, I think that's all the questions we have for today. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen in. If you have further questions, please don't hesitate to give me a call or send me an email, and I'll try and respond to those as quickly as possible. Again, thank you for joining us.